Hello everybody and welcome to the future of retail, how to transform a retail business into an omni-channel giant. My name is Matt Goddard and joining me today are Dr. Fiona Ellis-Chadwick, Gavin Masters and Doug Stevens. Just to give you, to start off really, give you a bit of an overview of why we're hosting this webinar. So I run a retail recruitment agency specialising within the fashion, beauty and luxury market. I recruit across the board. I specifically look after senior roles, but we look after retail roles, buying, merchandising, marketing, across the board really. And what we found recently is that clients were telling us that they feel that recruiters need to do a bit more, need to add value rather than just fill jobs. It was felt that recruiters should have insights to kind of offer, that we're networked, that we should really be differentiating ourselves from the competition. The perception of recruiters often is that we're out to make a quick buck, and that we're not really looking after clients on a longer term basis. So I surveyed my clients and I tried to really find out what value they kind of wanted, what would they find interesting, and what format would that kind of be in. So we looked at organising some live events, but webinars became the most popular, and so that's really why we are here hosting this very first webinar. And the most popular topic was looking at the multi-channel, the omni-channel offer, as that appears to be one of the main challenges that retailers are currently facing. So I'm now going to pass over to my panel to introduce themselves. So first of all, Doug, if you can give me a bit of an overview on yourself, on your expertise, please.
Sure. My name is Doug Stevens, and I am a retail futurist. I'm based out of Canada. I work with companies to identify trends in the retail market and also in consumer behavior. I've spent about 25 years in the retail market in just about every aspect of the business, and I'm also the author of a relatively new book called The Retail Revival, Reimagining Business for the New Age of Consumerism. I also do work in Canada with CBC Radio as a retail contributor for CBC Radio Canada.
Fantastic, great stuff. And I'm sure we'll have lots to talk to you about. And I think a lot of the questions that my clients have really asked are going to be, you know, what your insight is going to be particularly relevant. So thank you very much for that. Fiona, over to you. If you could just introduce yourself, please.
Fiona Ellis-Chadwick. I actually am a retailer, or I used to be a retailer before I became an academic, and I was passionately interested about the potential of the internet, and this was in the mid-80s. I could see that this was going to be a piece of technology that was going to change the world, so from there I got into researching, and for the last 20 years I've been looking at what retailers in the UK, that's high street retailers, how they've developed their online profile, and how the barriers, the advantages that some companies have had. I've also looked at the supply side of the business in terms of web development and the kind of barriers and factors that drive that business forward. In my career as an academic, I've done a great deal of writing in the marketing field, and also, Matthew, I noticed that you don't have my most relevant book on there, which is Digital Marketing, which is about implementation, strategy and practice, which I write with Dave Chaffee. In my university career, I've consulted on lots of projects. I do work with the BBC for the Open University, and again, all in the field of retail. I've written lots of academic articles, journal papers, teaching materials, but also practitioner articles. So that's me.
Thank you, Fiona. Fantastic. And finally, over to Gavin Masters.
Hi, yeah, I'm Gavin Masters and I head up the consultancy for a multi-channel SI based in Manchester. I've got a background in retail and pure play before joining agency side and providing consultancy services for a lot of leading retailers in the UK and around Europe. Yeah, so I'm coming from this from both sides of the fence. Really, I've dealt with a lot of retailers recently who are trying to get onto the multi-channel ladder. I know the stresses and strains that retailers have been through historically, trying to get themselves in a position where they can do that. I haven't really looked yet. I'm sure it's only a matter of time.
Thanks, Gavin. I'm losing the line a little bit with you. I'm not quite sure if you're. It sounds like you're in a. The microphone perhaps isn't so close to your mouth. I'm not sure if you can tweak that a little bit for us.
I can give it a go.
That's better, actually. That sounds much clearer. No problems. Brilliant. Well, I think I'm going to take it over to you three to really talk about some of the key issues. So I went back to my clients, to my candidates, and asked them, what were the pressing issues, what were the main concerns that they had around this particular space, and I've got 5 key areas to really focus on this afternoon. So the first one is upon the screen now. If you guys could just really talk about that from your own perspectives. I'm going to let you guys just talk it out amongst yourselves before we then move on to the next question. Over to you.
Well, I can kick off on this with some. I do a regular survey of what high street retailers in the UK are doing with the web, and something very simple to start with. It's getting websites so they are usable, so that you can actually use them on a mobile as well as on the web, so that people can see the content, so it's adaptable for the web. And of course that creates lots of challenges graphically to make the technology look right on all those different platforms. We're dreadful as consumers. We just like to see things and buy them, and we don't want to let the technology get in the way. So I think that's a really important start point.
I would agree with that, and I think it sort of leads into a bigger idea that I like to talk about with organizations, and that is the idea that the fundamental purpose of media, as we've known it, say, for the last 50 or 60 years, is changing. And what I mean by that is, if you go back 50 years, the purpose of media was fundamentally to talk about brand attributes, was to discuss product traits and features and benefits, and ultimately drive a consumer to a store or to a point of distribution. That's fundamentally changing now, and what's taking place is that media in all its forms is really becoming the store. And when I say that, I mean that the ad that I'm looking at now in the magazine has the potential not just to be a call to action, but to be actually a portal for commerce. And brands need to start thinking about it that way. The TV ad now can be a portal for commerce. The radio ad, if I'm using sound as a trigger for an experience, can now be an opportunity again for the consumer to actually buy. So in essence, media is becoming the store. And the corollary of that is that the store is, in essence, the purpose of the store is also transforming to become a powerful form of physical media. So we have to stop looking at m-commerce simply as a way of transitioning old media into a new channel, and look at it as actually building all these mini storefronts out there in the environment.
I think that's a really important point, and of course, as we see things developing even further, we've got TV programs that we watch. I know in North America, product placement has been more liberal than it has been in the UK, but we are seeing some freeing up of that. And now there's coming in the future, the opportunity to be able to get into those TV programs and to buy what's actually there. So I think you make a really useful and important point there.
Gavin, what are your thoughts on this?
Yeah, I think it's also important that retailers make the distinction between the different channels. I found that we have a lot of clients who want to approach every single channel equally and sort of allow the customer to do exactly the same thing via mobile or via whatever particular channel they're engaging with. And I think it's important to understand that customers engage with the brand very, very differently on different devices. Someone who is accessing the site through a mobile device is doing it for a different purpose than they are when using a desktop. Store or engaging with the brand online. There are different functions that retailers need to offer in the different channels. So the case of making sure that every channel is homogeneous from a functionality point of view, because the opportunity is very different.
Thanks for that, Gavin. We're losing the line a little bit there, but we think we got the gist of what you were saying there. So sorry about that, everyone. And Gavin, I'm not sure what has happened with your microphone there, but if you could tweak it for us, that would be great. Now, moving on.
Try switching it on.
Fantastic. Moving on, I know that, Fiona, you kind of mentioned that this wasn't your particular area of expertise, but this was one of the particular challenges that was presented to itself. Doug, do you have any particular thoughts on this side of things, on the CRM?
Well, yeah, and I mean, if anyone on the line is listening and they don't know what CRM is, we're talking, of course, of customer relationship management and programs and activities around trying to maintain knowledge of a consumer's behavior across channels. And I think that's really the essence of the challenge right now, is that, you know, if we look at our own behavior, if I, for example, look at my behavior online, if someone were looking at my profile, they would say that Doug Stevens on Amazon is a completely different consumer than Doug Stevens on eBay, and both of those guys are completely different than Doug Stevens when he goes and he shops in a physical store. Because, of course, I go to these different places for different needs. And I think retailers are also trying to struggle with this reaggregation of consumer identity. So how can they properly track a consumer who's looking at things on their website and connect that same consumer identity to the person that comes into their store and actually makes the purchase? And you know, and part of this is you know, we're talking a lot in the retail industry right now about this idea of showrooming or reverse showrooming. So do I go to stores and then make a purchase online, or do I first look online and then make a purchase in store? And a lot of that is a huge question mark until such time as we can reconnect consumer identities. The problem is, as consumers, we're wary. As consumers, we feel hunted by brands. You know, we feel like quarry, and we always feel that brands are trying to put one over on us in order to get more information. I think we're particularly sensitive about that now in light of all the various data breaches that are going on and privacy infractions and interruptions. So retailers have to give us a really great reason to want to open up our profiles to them and say, yes, this is me online and this is me when I come into your store, and you can connect those two. A great example of a brand that is doing that, in my opinion, is Neiman Marcus, high-end luxury brand based out of the U.S. They have a really great app that not only allows the consumer to shop online, but also allows them to tailor and customize their in-store experience. So they can actually use the app to call ahead, find a particular sales associate, have them put goods aside for them, and make that in-store experience a lot more pleasant and seamless. It also gives the in-store associate a full profile on that consumer. Everything that they've bought in store, everything that they have bought online. but the consumer's willing to share that information because they're getting a decidedly different experience in store. So I think that's where we are right now with the challenge of CRM and connecting consumer behaviors across channels.
And where do you think, Doug, that brands are going wrong with the whole CRM piece?
You know, again, I think it comes down to value, and I think that what we have done a dreadful job of, really, as an industry in retail, is we've done a really dreadful job of giving people value for their information or their data, or you know, for sharing with us, and it's been a very one-sided equation. You know, so it's you share personal information with me, and I in return will spam you. I will send you irrelevant coupons and offers that are meaningless to you. How's that? You know, do we have a deal? And I mean, it's been ridiculous. So I think we have to really get attuned to the idea that consumers are certainly willing to open up and share information, and they're willing to do so on pretty clear and reasonable terms. And those terms are, provided you are giving me relevant information, provided you have my best interests at heart, and that you respect my data and protect it and take care of it, and use it for my benefit as opposed to yours solely, I'm willing to share information with you. And certain brands, I think, get that. They get that equation. Starbucks is a good example. You know, Starbucks has probably the most popular mobile payment app of any retailer anywhere, because it gives great value and great function to the consumer first and foremost. And yes, of course, Starbucks benefits from the information that's thrown off that, but it's a very one-to-one equation for the consumer, and so we don't mind using it or sharing information with them.
Thank you, Doug. And, sorry, Philip, carry on.
Sorry, I was going to say from my perspective, whilst I'm certainly no expert in the use of CRM technology, but retailers in the UK, the nature of the high street, the information that they have has driven the homogenisation of the high street, and it's absolutely critical that we're not using CRM to do homogenisation on an individual scale. So retailers and brands have got to work out how to retain the excitement, because otherwise shoppers just are bored. And if you bore shoppers, and you know, if it is seemingly that you know everything about me and you can send me offers at absolutely the minute I want them, well, actually, do I need to bother at all? So I think it's quite a line that you have to walk down to take the information that you know and to use it effectively. So I think it's absolutely key that you have a strategy, you know, as Doug was saying, about how you're creating value and knowing those people. You know, are they serendipitous shoppers who actually want to be excited about something that they'd not even thought about? So I think there are lots of challenges, and I think we're going to be facing a lot of new challenges on how to get value out of this technology.
And you know, Matt, if I can just add one other thought to what Fiona just said, I think there's also the potential here to make some really kind of fatal assumptions as marketers, as retailers. We can sometimes assume, I think, too arrogantly, that consumers want to be part of our community. You know, that they really want to, quote unquote, engage with our brand. And I think that may be true in some cases, but in other cases, clearly it's not. And there is a disconnect in the marketing community where marketers believe, I think the figures are something like, there was one study that said about 70% of marketers believe that consumers want to engage with brands and be part of their community. But on the other side, only about 25% of consumers agreed with that statement. So I think we have to be careful about how we define CRM. And to Fiona's point, I don't think we can sort of say, okay, well, you know, we want to try and achieve this bland, banal, sort of average level of consumer relationship management. In some cases, what consumers want is they want frictionless ability to do business with you, and that's it. That's all they want. They don't want your articles, your stories, your tweets, or your Facebook posts. They just want to be able to do business with you quickly and easily, and I think that's where somebody like Amazon excels. On the other hand, they may want a deep, long, storied relationship with you where, maybe it's more of a Burberry sort of experience. But we can't just assume that every consumer wants the same sort of experience with every brand.
So it's definitely not a kind of one size fits all, is it?
Not at all.
It's really interesting how things have changed. I think because in marketing we spent years sort of exploiting and exploring how to get closer to the customer in terms of relationship development. What actually now what we're finding, and to add to your point, Doug, is that maybe it is just we just want that functional transactional relationship, which is where we were sort of 40 years ago.
That's right.
Gavin, what is your take on this?
Well, I can only really echo what Doug and Fiona have said. I think a lot of retailers need to realise that it's very much a two-way relationship. If they're wanting CRM information off a customer, the customer has to be incentivised to give that information. And whether that's sort of loyalty schemes and rewards, or whether that's just openness and honesty and the ability to see what information and interact with the information the retailer holds against them. Ironically, I think sometimes Amazon have to get it quite wrong.
Oh, sorry, I think Gavin, we're losing you again.
Sorry, is that better?
A little bit better.
Okay. So, yeah, I think Amazon sometimes do get it wrong because they try to be a little too clever. I find it frustrating sometimes. For example, you buy a high-value electronic good off Amazon, and 2 weeks later they're emailing you trying to sell the latest of exactly the same thing, because their marketing rules effectively are fairly blanket across their entire catalogue. Retailers who sell very, very broad catalogue items need to be...
I think we'll try and Gavin in a moment when the line, maybe we can sort his line out. So we'll move on. I think a lot of what Fiona was saying before about the excitement brings us nicely onto the next question, really, and looking about this concept of theatre and taking people back to the high street. So, Fiona, if you can perhaps start us off with this.
Yes, I think this is a great challenge, because what I've certainly noted in the work that I've done is there is a streamlining. The thing about online became 3 clicks to purchase, and it was how you could use the technology to streamline the purchasing behaviour. I think in the purchasing behaviour online, we've seen a very from some retailers quite a functional approach, and it links to what I was just saying about that transactional experience. Now, animation works insofar as it will get our attention to a particular part of a web page. I don't think that constitutes theatre. Interestingly, the survey that I've just done, looking at 1,200 high street retailers, there's very little use of film and video on websites, and if it is, it's embedded quite deeply. And I was quite interested to note that, because I thought, well, we've got much more opportunity, and people are very keen looking at YouTube and things like that, actually to look at sort of things that get us to follow them, to share them. Now, I'm not clear that is actually the way to create the theatre, but I'm just saying that I'm interested to see that there's very little experimentation going on. There's a lot of, certainly with UK websites, is a streamlining, following what everyone else is doing in almost, you could almost say, a template-based approach to online. If you look at 20 leading retailers, you'll find a lot of the same functionality, and I do think there is a lack of theatre online.
What, in terms of the stores, what would you define as perhaps a strong strategy with theatre within a store, and what that might look like?
Well, of course, what the thing is with it's retailers appeal to the senses. So if you take the successful coffee shops, it's the smell, it's the if you take the use of smell, it's very, very powerful, and it drives us. I mean, go back to Anita Roddick. She was out there in the street when she set up the body shop, sort of dropping essences on the street in Brighton, so that people could smell the shop, so that there was that physical contact, so the sensuality, and right from the early days of looking at the web, there isn't that opportunity to create that sensuality, and through sensuality you can create the emotional commitment and the emotional tie-in. Then you can follow that through with colour, with the contents, the merchandising within the store, which then takes your eyes through it visually. And there you have your engagement. Interestingly, why I stopped being a retailer and eventually got myself to the point that I am now in terms of researching in the web was this very issue. Now, the use of 3D, when the web first became a possibility, and Boo.com tried this with avatars. They wanted someone to come to help you shop, to show you round, to show you the goods, the merchandise, in a way that you might expect in a store. Now, that hasn't happened yet. I don't know whether that will become the next generation. But I mean, if you look at computer games, the graphical images, the way you can interact in computer games now is almost seamless. So the technology exists to create the theatre. I think at the moment it's a leap to how you use the technology's ability to give that excitement.
Excellent. Doug, and what is your perspective on this issue of theatre?
Well, it's interesting because we were talking before we started the webinar today, Fiona and I, and we both agree that in terms of this whole evolution of online and the threat that it poses to physical brick and mortar retail, we agree that we are sort of at the end of the beginning. That what we witness today in the marketplace is really, I would call, the embryonic stages of online retail as we know it. And I think what has happened so far and where we find ourselves today is it's very clear that if you are a brick and mortar retailer who is not actively pursuing an online strategy, you have to come to the reckoning that no one really needs what you sell anymore in the world. And it doesn't matter whether you sell shoes or coffee or furniture or apparel. No one needs what you sell, because if you don't sell it, I can guarantee you I can find a reasonable equivalent, if not the identical item online, and have it shipped to my door within a day or two. So I think brick and mortar retailers are finally, slowly awakening to the idea that it's not about what they sell, it's about how they sell it. And yes, that can be theatrical, or it can simply be different. It can be differentiated, unique, and somehow remarkable, that a consumer is going to walk out of the store and they're going to feel, wow, that was different. That was worth going into that store for. On the other side of the equation, though, I would also argue that as brick and mortar retailers awaken to the idea that they must be more experiential, I also think that online retailers are going to hit the same sort of wall, where they recognize that simply creating a relatively easy-to-use digital catalog of products is no longer going to be good enough going forward, and that consumer expectations are going to move. So I agree with Fiona in the sense that I see online becoming far more immersive. I'm watching closely with great anticipation Facebook's purchase of Oculus, the Oculus virtual reality headset concept, because I really do believe that virtual reality could potentially at some point introduce new shopping behaviors. I look at technologies like haptography, which is essentially the ability to feel textures through vibration, which could simply be on the keypad of your laptop or your tablet. I think online will become far more contextual. I think that we will be given opportunities to buy online depending on where we are, who we are with, potentially even what we're looking at or experiencing in the moment through things like Google Glass. So I sort of envision that as being kind of this next, call it the next era, which may only be 10 years long or 20 years long, but that's how fast time moves these days, the next era of retail.
And do you think that many retailers are kind of geared up for this yet? Excuse me.
No, I don't, and I think that is primarily why when we look at the headlines, with the exception of a very few traditional retailers, the headlines that we see are brands like, say, Warby Parker, coming into the optical market and disrupting it. Now, these are the people that founded Warby Parker had no experience in retail. They had no experience in the optical market. And the list goes on and on of startups that are challenging traditional retailers because they're simply coming in without any blinders on, without any industry baggage, and without the paradigms of, this is how we go to market, and they're simply reinventing categories. So I don't think in general that the market has really gotten their heads around the really massive tectonic changes that are taking place in the industry.
I would agree with you there, most definitely. I think for a lot of retailers in the UK, certainly, it has been a case of they have now got to the point where they can use this technology functionally to offer a range of channel choice and to make it work with the logistics. I think at the moment we're at the stage where we're making it work, and we're making and taking advantage of the technology in almost now its very basic form. And I think you're right that we are just on the brink of what's going to come next, and it will be a challenge for those retailers, who is going to lead that forward.
Mm-hmm.
Gavin, do we have you back?
I hope so. Can you hear me?
I can, yeah.
Excellent. Okay. Yeah, I agree with the sentiments, but I think as a note of caution, what I find a lot of people wanting to do is use technology and use theatre for the sake of it, as opposed to for an end game or ultimately for customer convenience. So in a previous role, there was great interest in using augmented reality on products to give richer, more involved experiences, and what ultimately it did was gave a very, very quick thrill of 5 minutes of showing a new feature, followed by quite a bit of frustration that it wouldn't work again, or sort of just an acceptance that was now the norm, and that there was nothing special about it anymore. I think people have become quite jaded when it comes to using new technology just for the sake of showing that you can do something. So retailers do need to think very carefully about their application of theatre, as you put it.
I mean, I would pick up on that to say that, I've just thought of an example actually of where theatre really works with the real world and the virtual world. Auction houses these days, and yeah, okay, eBay has the auction market arguably sewn up, but if you look at a real live auctioneer and people buy online, there you get the excitement of the auction where you've got people bidding in a live situation. You've also got people bidding online. So on the physical side, you've got people getting bids in from Australia, the States. They might be sitting, say, in Nottingham, but also they can do that online, and they can be remotely in those places. There's a lot of excitement there, and there's been quite a significant growth in purchasing in that way. and it's a good example of where that's, if you like, theatre in action.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think that, and I think to some extent I would agree with both points, and I'm not saying that simply to be agreeable. I actually do. I think that there are certainly, I think, superfluous uses of technology for technology's sake, but I think that is almost sort of a stage gate that we have to go through. You know, where we always start by being fascinated with the technology. I point to social media, where only 5 to 7 years ago we were absolutely dumbfounded by the idea that we could make these connections with people on the other side of the world so easily, and that we could share ideas and concepts and content. And now that's an embedded it's an embedded behavior. I mean, we watch Twitter on the news now, so I think that we have to go through these periods of fascination with the technology for technology's sake in order to find the true application of those technologies. But where we do, I think they can certainly be very game-changing.
Gavin, do you want to come back on that before we move on?
Absolutely. I mean, I agree entirely. There is always a risk associated with being on the bleeding edge of anything. And yes, there are plenty of successes of things that we look at and think are ridiculous or are never going to work. I think there just needs to be a note of caution sometimes that theatre, for the sake of theatre, is not always in the best interest of the end customer, which is ultimately what the aim of most of this should be.
Excellent, thank you for that, Gavin. So, moving on then to, I guess, a more broad question. Who wants to tackle this? In fact, if we go to Gavin first, I'm conscious we have gone to Gavin last on the last few questions. So, Gavin, if you want to kind of start us off with this.
Absolutely. So I think the important point of that is the phrase integrated. I think it's ensuring that the business as a whole is able to be flexible and approach new opportunities through channels quickly and in a cost-effective manner. I think to use the phrase that's been used a couple of times, we're at the end of the beginning now, and I think what retailers are realizing is that they need to be in a position where online and omnichannel are a core central part of the business. Historically, e-com has been sort of a bolt-on, sort of a second thought that doesn't hold the same importance as stores and even catalogue and phone orders. That needs to change. A retailer needs to realize that they need to be completely channel agnostic. They need to have systems that can cope with sales coming from anywhere, customers seeing their products in any particular way, whether that's through one of their channels, through a third-party channel, or however it may be. They need to have the flexibility to understand and interpret that information that they're getting.
Excellent.
Yeah, I agree with that, and especially the notion of being channel agnostic. And I think part of that comes back to developing a new understanding as a brand or as a retailer of the new nature of the path to purchase. We've always believed and thought, rightly so, that the path to purchase was quite linear, quite logical, and quite controllable. That consumer began, in most cases, by becoming aware of us or becoming aware of our products through media, and then went through this relatively practiced stage of behaviors before they finally came in and purchased a product from us. And now that is not the case. I mean, we know just from some recent studies that consumers may gain awareness of a product on Facebook, and that may take them to the brand's website, which in turn may take them to the brand's mobile app where they make the purchase. However, that can also be completely reversed. You know, their first knowledge of a brand may be by going to their stores, and then they wind up sort of checking them out on Facebook, and that takes them to their website. So the path now is completely circuitous and very, very difficult for a brand to control. So I think what we have to start doing is rather than thinking of path to purchase in linear fashion, we need to start deconstructing that and saying, what are the moments in time, the moments, the places, the instances where a consumer may either be thinking about or have the need for our product, and what combination of surfaces, technologies, devices, and mediums can we use to bring the ability to buy our product to the consumer in that moment. So not thinking about it in terms of this pull to our brand, but actually just taking the availability of a product directly to the consumer in the moment that they need it, which is an entirely different strategy from a retail standpoint. So I think it's again, it's a huge sort of concept for a brand to wrap their heads around, and it requires a completely different method of operating going forward.
Yes, I would agree. I think it is important that it's seamless. It's seamless, whatever the channel is for the consumer, and it is about making sure. And I think that's one of the challenges actually that a lot of retailers face, is all of the legacy systems that they've actually got in place that are making it difficult for them to offer that seamless experience. So when you ask the question, what are the key traits required to be a truly integrated omni-channel brand, I think it is looking at the whole of the organisation and seeing not only how the technology works together, but it's much more basic than that actually. It's looking at how the functions within the business work together. You know, does marketing work with finance, with logistics? Do they all, and technology? You know, because I mean, for years there's been tension between marketing and technology, and you know, it is about looking at the whole of the organisation. So the organisations that are going to succeed are those that have got a way through both the technology, the seamless operation, but also through their business planning, where they've got one view, one voice.
And are there any particular tips that you would give to fledgling brands that are just really starting to think about this stuff now, that maybe haven't got anything set up yet?
Plan. Set your objectives. What do you want to get out of the technology, and build it from the ground up?
Yeah, and I would argue too that that you really, you know, apart from sort of taking a very mobile first approach, I think you have to build whatever you're building with mobile clearly in mind first and foremost. I think again you have to sort of, the going in assumption now has to be that ultimately nobody's concerned really with what you sell, that your product is relatively interchangeable, you know, and available on the market. You have to find a way that is either, you know, highly compelling and very sticky, a really beautifully sticky way of selling to customers that's highly engaging, or on the other hand, if you believe that the customer wants a frictionless experience, then you have to really design for that. But you can't just look at the idea of being on mobile or having a mobile store as a differentiator anymore. It's not. It's no more differentiating than having a website was 5 years ago. So you really have to design for the experience that you have in mind. And what I find most of the time, Matt, when I talk to brands and they say, Doug, what technology should we be looking at now? What are the most important technologies for us to be exploring? My answer back to them is ultimately, what kind of experience are you trying to design? Because if you don't understand the experience that you have in mind, the end experience for the customer, then you really have no starting point for which technologies to explore. Everything looks like a good idea, you know, and that's not the place you want to be in. So it really comes back to saying, how is our experience going to differentiate us as a brand, and how can we leverage technology, be it mobile or otherwise, to create that experience?
Yeah, I completely agree with that. It's so important to make sure that the use of the technology is giving value to the whole of the experience and the customer.
Thank you, guys. That's great. And the next question then, I think we've sort of maybe touched upon this a moment ago, but from your perspectives, what is the next major challenge? We spoke about things are going to be moving pretty fast, and we're at the start of something quite big. What would you foresee as perhaps the one major challenge, and how do retailers need to be responding to that?
Big question. A really big forward-looking question. From my perspective, I suppose, I think the next challenge is really the challenge that we find right now, and that is that you know, we just live in a market now that is so proliferated with options. That the consumer has just this inordinate universe of options at their fingertips. And so I believe that the ongoing challenge is really going to be for retailers to determine how they differentiate and how they create new value. And it really means re-evaluating and regenerating their value propositions. I don't think we can't forget that, you know, whether we're talking about the UK or North America or Australia or other developed nations around the world, we are coming off 50 to 60 years of inordinately good times. You know, where apart from the financial disaster of 2008, we are coming off an unprecedented period of time for consumerism, and it's been a really fat and lazy time. And I think we're just now starting to separate the wheat from the chaff. So going forward, again, it's going to be a question of not looking at technology and saying, oh, me too, I need to be on mobile. It's a question of looking at it and saying, how can we completely reinvent our value proposition to create a new and hopefully maintainable, I won't say sustainable, but maintainable competitive advantage, and how can we use these technologies to assist us in doing that? I think that's the real challenge, and it has nothing to do with technology, frankly.
I would agree with you that it's not technology, but I think the major challenge is going to be for national retailers is from international retailers. If you think about the nature of the web, it's been dominated by North America, the UK. If you look at the figures and the growth of the uptake of the internet, it's been the English language which has dominated. That is now shifting and changing. So if you look at the Asian markets, China, India, Brazil, even to a smaller extent Russia, there are a lot of businesses out there now which are growing very fast, creating marketplaces which are becoming incredibly dynamic. And so I think for retailers to stay ahead of the curve, what they've got to be doing, and this ties in with what Doug was saying, it's about differentiation, but it's the other side. It's looking at the competition and looking at where the competition is coming from.
Good point.
And do you see, Fiona, particular markets within the industry? So, you know, during the recession, it was the value retailers that did really well, and also the sort of top-end retailers, the mid-market that kind of struggled. Do you see any particular markets doing particularly well and others suffering more?
I don't know particularly, because I think what you're asking me to do is to sort of put my finger in the air and go and say, well, you know, what's going to be the next big thing in terms of the economic trends. buying trends. So I'm not sure that I can answer that question particularly well, but I do think it still ties into the whole thing. Since we've moved beyond, certainly in developed markets, from buying for necessity, we don't really buy for necessity anymore. We buy a lot of the purchases we make, if you separate food out, a lot of the purchases we make are those which interest us and excite us. And if you go back to the very history of trading, it's always been international trade which has attracted our attention, and foreign goods, which unusual goods, different things. And I think it will be about the excitement. It will be about the products, the experience, which is exciting, and I think that will be the future.
I do think, though, Matt, I would add to that, though, and I'm just kind of carrying off the comment you made about sort of the high-low proposition. I do think it's reasonable to assume, though, that we're going to continue to see sort of this bifurcation that we've seen taking place, where I prefer not to think of it as purely sort of luxury versus discount, but I prefer to think of it in terms of what I call high convenience or super high convenience propositions, which are just, situations where it's super easy to buy from you. You have a very frictionless customer experience. You make it easy for me to shop across devices, across platforms, 24/7, 365 delivered to the door. There's that. Or on the other end of the spectrum, it's the really high fidelity proposition that is all about concierge service. It's about relationship building. It's about quality and craftsmanship. And we're really seeing tension between those two poles. And everything in the middle that is just sort of average, mediocre commodity goods, those are the markets that have been really suffering, and I suspect will continue to suffer.
Fantastic. And Gavin, if I could come back to you and find out what you foresee perhaps as the next major challenge that we've got coming up.
I think the challenge most people are facing is the technology ecosystem. I think we're getting to a stage where a wider number of devices and a wider number of objects are able to interact online, and as such be able to transact online. And what that's opening up the potential for is for manufacturers to deal directly with end consumers and cut out the retailers altogether. So you're looking at things like smart cars that know to order replacement parts when they develop a fault, fridges that will do your grocery order from you from the supplier that the fridge manufacturer has agreed is your seller of food, not necessarily you have. There is coming a time where the middleman is being cut out of a lot of manufacturing relationships as manufacturers see it cheaper to deal directly with end consumers because it's more practical to do.
Brilliant point.
Mm-hmm.
Anything else anyone wants to sort of add on any of that? Because that actually is the last question. So if anyone wants to kind of sum up what we've spoken about as a whole today.
Yeah, I think I couldn't agree more with Gavin. I think that we are, again, and I point to this idea that we're coming to the end of an era, because really retail, as we have known it up until now, has been the most efficient means of getting products to market. And in fact, you could argue it's been the only means of getting products to market. And for a lot of manufacturers, it's been a necessary evil, where they've had to split the margin, sometimes very unwillingly, with retailers who haven't offered or added a tremendous amount of value along the way to earn that margin. So Gavin's point is well taken. Brands are certainly going to be looking for any means that they can use to disintermediate retail.
Fantastic. Well, that's actually it for today. Thank you very much, guys, for joining me. Some really compelling stuff there. Before we actually go, I know that Fiona and Doug, you both got books, and Fiona, sorry for advertising the old book, if you can let us know again about the most recent book that you'd like to promote.
I've got two. It's Digital Marketing Strategy Implementation and Practice by myself and Dave Chaffee, and The Principles of Marketing, which is the image that you do have on the slides. So that's my two books.
Fantastic. And where can we buy them on Amazon?
Amazon, of course.
And can we buy them in shops or just
Yes,
online?
they're available from
All
Waterstones,
good
and yeah, so you can get hold of them anywhere. And if you do get any problem, if you go through to my website, which is ellischadwick.com, there's a link there to both of them.
That's brilliant, Fiona. And Doug, if you could just give us your book one last time.
You bet. The book is called The Retail Revival, Reimagining Business for the New Age of Consumerism, and it is available on Amazon, certainly. And again, you can also go to my website, which is Retail Profit, and that's profit with a PH, retailprofit.com. I also do a tremendous amount of speaking, so if anyone is interested in speaking topics and or blog articles, you can also pick them up at retailprofit.com.
Fantastic, and I guess we can find a lot more in-depth insight from the kind of things that you've been talking about to us this afternoon. Fantastic, that's great. And Gavin, you've not written any sort of books, but is there anything that you would like to, you can promote your business, anything you'd like to kind of mention before we actually leave today?
Well, as I said, I head up the consultancy at Imaginus, so if anybody wants to get in touch with me and discuss anything we've brought up today, I'm more than happy to have a conversation with people. My email address is gavin.masters@maginus.com, or I'm on LinkedIn if anyone wants to look me up there. I'm happy to have conversations.
Thank you, Gavin. Once again, thank you for joining me. It's been fantastic, brilliant insights, and I've enjoyed having you on this very first webinar, which I hope will be the first of many. So thank you once again, guys.
Thank you, Matthew.
I'll speak to you soon.
Thank you.
Take care.
Thanks, Matt.
Pleasure. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.